The Los Angeles Kings are looking to go on a little bit of a win streak as the New York Rangers come to town, plus some moves in the Kings front office as Marc Bergevin joins the team. All that and more on today's edition of Locked On Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Kings fans, you are listening to Locked On Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you all sorts of news and fun facts all about the Kings, basically every day. My name is Sarah Avampato, host of this show. As always, I am glad to be here with you as you make this show, hopefully your first listen of the day every day. On today's show, we've got a little bit of ground to cover. First off, we're going to talk about the front office news, and then we're going to talk about the Rangers. So let's recap, whatever. The Kings announced on Sunday that Marc Bergevin was joining the front office staff as a senior advisor to general manager Rob Blake. It is a consultant role. It's a consulting capacity. So what that means remains to be seen. But we're going to talk a little bit with Gil Martin from Locked On NHL and Locked On Islanders. Gil and I sat down for Locked On NHL on Monday to talk about the latest news, my thoughts and feelings. Is this a good idea, bad idea? Who knows? So we're going to talk about that today. And then I sit down with Chik from Locked On Rangers as we take a look at tonight's game, learn a bit about the Rangers, what's going on with them, who to look out for, and whether or not Brendan Lemieux is going to bite anyone in this one. So let's get down to it right now with my conversation with Gil Martin from Locked On NHL, all about the Marc Bergevin news.
Always a pleasure to welcome back a very familiar face to the Monday version of the Locked On NHL podcast, Sarah Avampato, now of course, of Locked On LA Kings. And Sarah, great to have you here again.
Always glad to be here. I wish it would be under like really fun circumstances sometimes, though.
Well, we'll work on that. We'll get there. We'll get there. I mean, these aren't bad circumstances, I hope. I mean, okay, let's talk about it. The LA Kings adding Marc Bergevin to their front office. I mean, kind of an interesting situation because he is a senior advisor to GM Rob Blake. So let's start with this. What exactly does that mean?
Who knows? That's the question. This isn't the first time the Kings have done something like this. I think Ron Hextall was a senior advisor consultant a couple years ago. They have a long history of kind of bringing on guys like this. And initially when this came out, it sort of felt like gonna do my buddy a solid, give him a job for a little bit and, pay him so he can give me an opinion every so often. But I think that especially Rob Blake, I mean, he's far enough into his tenure as GM that he doesn't necessarily need, someone else hanging around. But especially earlier in his career, it did make sense to have a sort of, experienced GM who was just sort of in between jobs, hanging out to bounce ideas off of them. And I feel like that is kind of what this is as well, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, should Rob Blake be looking over his shoulder, I guess, really becomes the big question.
Yeah, that's sort of the big question mark hanging over all of this. Rob Blake, I think this is the last year of his deal. He has talked about, he has every intention of re-signing. The organization has given no indication that things might be troubled. The Kings are a rebuilding team, and everyone knows that. So this isn't a, playoffs or bust kind of thing. But there are now rumors that at the kind of end of the season, that Bergevin may be signing a deal to officially become the assistant general manager of the team, which that puts the little, face in the rearview mirror for Rob Blake, because why else do you have Marc Bergevin sitting around as your assistant if you aren't preparing to maybe elevate him in the future?
Your thoughts about Bergevin, what he brings to the table, what concerns you about him coming into the organization?
I mean, his track record speaks for itself in both the positive and the negative. He is generally regarded as a guy who is pretty good in terms of making trades. You don't often hear about, especially when he was with Montreal, like he didn't exactly, make huge moves, but he was, he fleeced enough teams as Montreal's GM that you're like, okay, like you can always use someone else to kind of help you concoct a trade. But drafting, horrible. If he's involved in drafting in any way, I'm going to be very concerned. The Kings have been fantastic at drafting over the past, many years now, and I would hope that he stays far away from that. Like that's not even going into the whole Logan Mailloux situation of Bergevin being like, yeah, that was fine with me. Just in general, the Canadians haven't drafted particularly well outside of like Cole Caulfield, probably. So that is concerning. And, just in general, his involvement in more than his fair share of NHL scandals does give you cause for concern of has he learned any lesson out of any of this? He has been unemployed for 40 something days, I saw online.
Right.
What has he learned either from any of his involvement in any of the bad things that have gone down, and what has he learned in terms of what is going to make him a better leader, a better GM in the future? And I don't really think that there's an answer to that. So it is concerning. I mean, he does. I wasn't concerned until I started seeing the reports saying, "Oh, he's actually going to sign a contract to be the assistant GM." Then I was like, "Oh, great! So he actually is going to have input." I don't know that I like this.
Yeah, that does sort of change the tone of that kind of a signing and the hiring. As far as the Kings are concerned right now on the ice, fighting for a playoff berth in the thick of things. Nice shutout win over the weekend. And well, let's start with this because I think I have to ask this to every host. Who's out with COVID and who's healthy? I mean, how bad is it on the Kings roster right now?
They actually have been fairly lucky, knock on wood. They have had just a few guys out at a time. It's never been more than 2 or 3 guys out. I think the latest additions to the COVID list were both Alex Iafallo and Alex Turcotte, and both of those guys are. I think Turcotte just got taken off the list, and I'm pretty sure that Iafallo is as well. So I think they may not actually have anyone on the COVID list after the next couple of days. So they have been very lucky, and the silver lining is that it has given some of the younger players the chance to step up. Alex Turcotte, until he got COVID, was getting his feet wet in the NHL. It opened a spot for Martin Ferk, who has been down toiling in the AHL, but is back up with his very, very heavy shot and already scoring. So fortunately, injuries aren't too bad, and COVID has so far not been as huge of an impact as for other teams. I think only games that they've had rescheduled have been because of things impacting the other team. I think that a couple games up in Canada they were supposed to do that they have not been able to get done yet.
Talk to me a little bit about Jonathan Quick. It's almost like he's gone into a time machine and has really gone back to the way he played a few years ago as compared to the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, it has been. If you asked me at the beginning of the season, what would my surprise storyline have been? It definitely would not have been this. Quick, we all kind of saw as a guy who's on the downswing of his career. Numbers just kept getting worse year after year, and you're like, okay, well, he's still around. He's a great backup kind of guy, good veteran mentorship. And then this year, he came back looking like 2012, 2014 Jonathan Quick. And it's been good because Cal Peterson, who was supposed to be kind of inching towards becoming the starter, has struggled. So I was really glad to see him get that shutout in against Detroit because, he gets a little confidence back. He made some good saves. So hopefully we get him rolling too. But yeah, Jonathan Quick has looked phenomenal. He has been a big reason why this team is currently, at least last time I looked at the standings, in a wild card position. So it's very unexpected, but I'm not going to complain about it. All right. Thanks to Gil for sharing some time with me to talk all about what's going on with the Kings. Up next, we're talking with John Chik from Locked On Rangers. But before we do that, let's talk all about Built Bar, because if you need snacks, if you need energy, if you need something to help get you through your day, you want to go and make sure you're checking out Built Bar. They are protein bars that taste like candy bars. They're covered in 100% chocolate, and they're basically just delicious and also good for you. They are low in calories, high in protein, high fiber, low sugar, all that great stuff. And the best thing is they come in a ton of amazing flavors, including things like cookies and cream, one of my personal favorites. They've got like a chocolate cookie dough chunk thing, a coconut brownie thing, lots of great options. And if you're someone who is more like, no, I want them to always taste healthy and not like candy, there's things like orange and raspberry and all sorts of great things for you, no matter what kind of sweet tooth you have. So go check out built.com, see all the cool stuff they have available. They've always got limited edition flavors and stuff hanging out. So you can always find something that you are into by going and checking out built.com. You can use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off when you make your order at built.com. So go and check that out. Now we're going to hear from John Chik from Locked On Rangers. He and I sat down to talk a little bit about the game that is coming up tonight. So let's get right into that now on Locked On Los Angeles Kings.
All right, so welcome back, Ranger fans and Kings fans. This is John Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by Sarah Evampato of Locked On Kings. Sarah, how are we doing today?
Not too bad. Excited to see what happens in this one.
Yeah, me too. You know, obviously it's a rematch from the 2014 finals, and as we were just talking about before we hit record here, both of our teams coming off of very impressive wins. The Rangers going into Anaheim, dominating the third period, posting a 4-1 win, and of course the Kings blanking the Red Wings last night, beating them 4-0. What are you seeing from the Kings lately? Because obviously they've been playing pretty well, and the way things stand right now, looking like kind of a fringe playoff team out there in the Western Conference.
It's always interesting because games with the Kings are kind of a tale of two kings, essentially, because they'll have games where they just come out and they look like they have never met each other before and never played hockey before, and you're wondering, like, what's happening? Like, why are you doing this to us? But then, you'll have more complete efforts like we saw against the Red Wings, where they won 4-0, 5-0 maybe. They were whatever. They won. It was really good. They had a really good game against the Flyers the other day, where you're actually seeing them ready from puck drop and actually competing hard the whole time, and you get consistency with the lines and everything instead of trying to change stuff up. So we've been seeing when they're at their best, like this in this game against Detroit, they are a team that is playing the game the right way, and they're looking like a dangerous team. And I'm hoping that that's the team we see against the Rangers tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Rangers, last night they were also in action. They go into Anaheim. They're 1-1 going into the third period, and they end up winning the game 4-1. And, crazy third period because goals from the Rangers came from Jared Tenorti, who's usually a healthy scratch. That's probably the only goal he'll get all season. But good for him. It was cool to see. And then Ryan Lindgren ends up getting 2 goals, including the empty netter to kind of seal the deal there. But it also kind of just continued this trend, a very positive thing that I've noticed about the Rangers this season. Well, 2 things, actually. For starters, they tend to really bounce back after a disappointing loss. They played Vegas the game before, and, they were 1-1 in the second period, and then the game just kind of got away from them. And, it happens from time to time. You play 82 games. Sooner or later, that's going to happen, especially when you've got a young team like the Rangers. But they lose that game 5-1, and they bounce back with a win against Anaheim. But also, the Rangers now 10-0-1 when tied going into the third period. And you hear a stat like that, it really jumps off the page, and it really makes you think, like, wow, this is a team that knows how to get it done in crunch time. So I will say this, Sarah, you don't want the Kings to be tied with the Rangers, I don't think, going into the third period. Now I'll say that and watch the Kings win. But, so far, the Rangers are really in their element when that's the case this season, when they're tied going into the third.
Yeah, I feel like looking at the thing that I feel like has most surprised me about the Rangers has been kind of the big jump that they've really taken from last season to this season. Don't know that I realized that they were one of the top teams in the league until I was kind of getting ready for this conversation and looking at where the Rangers are. And here they are sitting amongst, teams that everyone sort of pegged as playoff favorites, if not Stanley Cup favorites. And there's the Rangers. So what is driving this? Is it kind of the young players? Is it the veterans stepping up? How did this happen? Because I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I would say that, obviously the Rangers have been in this massive teardown rebuild phase over the past couple of seasons here. And I think this season is a reminder that when you rebuild, it doesn't always go like in even increments every single season. Sometimes you can get to a point where, they don't just move up a little bit. They take a huge jump forward, whichever team is, coming out of a rebuild. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with the Rangers. But as far as, what's the driving force behind it, I mean, I can't go a second longer without mentioning Igor Shesterkin. Now, he is on the COVID protocol list, and Alex Georgiev's done a fantastic job in his absence. But early in the season, the Rangers, they got a new coaching staff. They got some new faces, new line combinations, and what have you. So it really came down to Igor Shesterkin just stealing game after game after game. I mean, he was absolutely ridiculous. If you look at the first 3 weeks, maybe even the first month of the season, forget about the Vezina. I think you could make a candidate that Igor was maybe the MVP of the league. I mean, he was that good, and the Rangers were winning games that they just had no business winning. So he really picked them up earlier in the season. And I think, since then, the rest of the team is kind of caught up. Guys are getting used to playing with each other. That chemistry is there. Chris Kreider, I never thought that we would see a season where he really put all the pieces together like he has. Now, don't get me wrong. Kreider's been a very, very good player for the Rangers. One of my favorites over the years, the longest tenured player on the New York Rangers. But he's 30 years old, and I just figured at this point, we're just going to have to get used to Chris Kreider being that guy who's really hot and cold. It's not going to change. He's a very streaky player. But this year, I mean, the guy's been unbelievable. He comes to play every single night, having a career best season at the age of 30. So that's really cool as well. I mean, as far as the defensemen, I would take the Ranger, their top 4 defensemen against maybe any other quartet in the NHL. I mean, Fox, we all know about him. Fox is, what he does speaks for itself. Ryan Lindgren, very underrated defenseman, I think, around the league. I don't think people realize how good he is, just kind of like an old school throwback. Jacob Trouba's done a fantastic job. And Keandre Miller, he had a little bit of a hiccup last night. It actually led to a goal for the Ducks, but I think he's had a great season as well. So it really is a little bit of everything. And then, of course, you've got guys like Panarin and Zibanejad. You know what you're going to get from them. So they've been great. How about the Kings? Because, they've been down a little bit over these last couple of seasons. But, again, kind of like a fringe playoff team right now. What's kind of been the driving force behind them, having a little bit of a resurgence this season?
One of the things is a player that I think a lot of Kings fans, sort of like you were saying with Chris Kreider, of how you just were like, well, he is what he is. We've just accepted this. There's going to be times where he's frustrating. There's going to be times where he's great. The Kings have Adrian Kempe, who right now is playing up on the top line. He actually leads the team in goals. He has 15 goals this season, which is, usually Anze Kopitar leads the team in every possible, category. But this year, Adrian Kempe is leading the team in goals, and it's actually, his career high in goals was 16, set back in his rookie season. So, we're not even halfway through the season, and he is on pace to blow that out of the water. But he is a player who similarly has always been, really hot and cold. He'll score a bunch of goals all at once and then go dry for the next 15 games. And instead, he has actually been, really helping to drive play. He's been getting really good opportunities at the net, and he's actually been capitalizing on them. And his shooting percentage isn't too much off of where it usually is. So this isn't like you always see that one guy who scores a bunch of goals, and then you're like, oh, you shot at 30% this year for some reason.
Yeah.
So he's been really important for the Kings this year, which is strange for fans because every year they're ready to trade him at the deadline to move on from him. But I think this is a contract year for him. So not surprised, but he's been really, really helpful for this team in scoring because that's not not always their strength. And I mean, another huge thing for the Kings that can't really be overstated is Jonathan Quick looking like, 2012, 2014 Jonathan Quick.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I know that he had an off-season surgery that addressed some, I think, shoulder issues or something. But, the team has been, subtly ready to move on from him. His contract is winding down. They signed Cal Peterson to a nice deal for the next several years. And then, Peterson put together a really good performance against Detroit, and I'm hoping that kind of gets him back on track. But he's had a rough season this season so far. and Quick stepping up and putting together not just, some of his best numbers, but honestly some of the best numbers in the league for goaltenders has been a big driving force behind keeping this team in the hunt for a playoff spot. I know when I went to sleep last night, they were in a wild card spot. So, knock on wood that it stays that way. But Jonathan Quick has been really big for this team, which I think poses a big question for the Kings in the future of, well, now what do we do if Peterson doesn't bounce back? But he's been really huge this year.
Yeah, I got to say, I looked up quick stats, a little bit earlier today before we started recording here, and I was surprised. I mean, for starters, I was kind of surprised that he fell off the way that he did. I mean, I know goalies, they can't be elite forever, but, he is I think he just turned 35, and it was just surprising to see, a guy who was, maybe the best goalie in hockey just basically fall off a cliff. But now, he's kind of turned back the clock, like you were saying a little bit this season, and just having a great season. But, one thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the trade deadline real quick there and how, a lot of Kings fans are always looking for them to deal Kempe near the deadline. What do you think the Kings' approach will be at the deadline this season? Because, again, you can kind of get caught in between a little bit here. Some of these teams that are kind of like fringe playoff teams. I mean, do the Kings buy? Do they try to give this core group of players, one more chance to make a playoff run? Or could you see some guys being sold? Or do they just kind of stand pat? I mean, any kind of inkling as far as what they might do at the deadline this season?
My guess is that if things continue the way they are, that they're probably just going to either stand pat or make kind of minor deals. Every so often you see those guys who are, third, fourth liners getting moved at the deadline because someone wants some more grit or whatever. If they get into a more solid playoff spot, they've been sort of bouncing in and out of that wild card spot lately. So if they get it more solidified, I could see them maybe making a small addition. I don't think they're ready quite yet to, throw the farm at getting someone big to come in. But I think that the talent is there, and now it's sort of at the point where it's like, you hope they make the playoffs just to give these young players the experience of the playoffs, to give them that drive for the next year. But, the team, if you look back at those rosters from 2012, 2014, the only players who are left, Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown, Drew Doughty, Jonathan Quick, and none of those guys are going anywhere. Brown, I think, is at the end of his contract, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with him, but I doubt that he gets moved unless he wants to be moved at the deadline. Kopitar obviously not going anywhere. Doughty is here forever. So it would be more kind of those young, like, spare parts, essentially, which sounds mean, but, Andreas Athanasiou, he's hurt right now, so not a great example, but he's not the future of this team. But if the Kings aren't in a position where they're going to be making meaningful hockey at the end of the year, another team might be interested in picking up a speedy young forward, and then that opens up a roster spot for the Kings for the future. But I don't see them being big players unless something really wild happens down the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think a lot of times it depends on how the market kind of shakes out. Is this going to be a buyer's market or a seller's market this season? And, how much does it take to get? I mean, that's always going to be a question, is how much do you have to give up to get such and such a player? But, with the Rangers and where they are in the standings, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Sarah, that they are maybe like a little bit ahead of schedule, quote unquote, and, surprising some people this season. And certainly it looks like they're going to be set up to be, contenders both in the short term and in the long term. But, I was thinking about this the other day, too. You never know. I mean, yeah, it looks like the Rangers are going in the right direction and that they should be, able to be a top team for several seasons going forward. But you never know when you're going to catch lightning in a bottle the way that they have this season. So I'm really hoping going into the deadline that they're kind of bold and, they might add, a right winger. They've had on the second line kind of a revolving door at the right wing spot over the years. I mean, guys have just kind of been shuffled in and out of there. And I'd like to see a sniper, added to that line in the trade deadline because, I mean, the passes that he would get from Panarin and Ryan Strome, I mean, if you put a sniper on the right wing, that'd be unbelievable. That'd be great to see. Maybe a defenseman for a little bit of depth there too. But I'm really hoping the Rangers, at least make a move or two, a pretty significant move or two to make this team better because, I mean, other teams around the league are going to be looking to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of hope they go all in. I mean, don't overdo it and trade the entire farm. But when you're having a season like this, I think you owe it to yourself to be aggressive come trade deadline time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do want to ask you about a player that we touched on kind of briefly, and that's Adam Fox. And he, obviously one of, if not the best defenseman in the league, depending on who you ask. But it's been interesting catching up with him because, obviously last season, these two teams didn't meet. And there's only so many hours in the day. So, didn't get to see Adam Fox quite as much as I wanted. And then suddenly here he is, Norris caliber defenseman, and everyone's like, where did this guy come from? So I imagine that there's other Kings fans in sort of the same bubble of, I know this guy's name, but what makes him so special? So that is my question, is what exactly makes Adam Fox so great?
He is just the total package. I mean, he's somebody who is a great two-way defenseman. I mean, this is for, Kings fans who maybe haven't gotten a chance to see him play. I'll kind of just take it from the top here. And for starters, I mean, the Rangers absolutely stole this guy from the Carolina Hurricanes, just giving up 2 second-round draft picks to bring him in. But, he's not necessarily a defenseman that's going to go out there and knock your head off. He's not really known for these bone-jarring hits or anything like that. But he just doesn't get beat. He never gets caught out of position, spends just a ton of time on both the power play as well as the penalty kill. His hockey IQ and his vision on the ice are second to none. Some of the passes that this guy makes, I think you or me might be able to score on some of the passes that, he makes to his teammates. I mean, he does it all, and it's funny because this offseason, the Rangers, they wanted to, well, first of all, let me back up just a second here. He's obviously in the race for the Norris Trophy last season, and it's kind of a 3-man race between him and Makar and Hedman. And as a Ranger fan, I'm coming on my show and I'm campaigning for him, and this is why he should be the Norris and this, that, and the other thing. And then he wins the Norris, and obviously I'm happy for him. But then it's like, oh boy, he just won the Norris. Like he's gonna need a really big contract here, because he can now make the claim that he's the best defenseman in the league. So it's crazy. They signed him to an 8-year extension. And it's at, I believe, $9.5 million a season. And it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But at the same time, this dude's 23 years old. He's only going to be 31 when that contract runs out. And imagine how much better he can get between now and then. So as far as long-term, 8-year, $9.5 million per season deals are concerned, I don't think it gets any safer than that, than this one specifically, because he's already at just a tremendously elite level. And it's just a pleasure to watch him play hockey every single night. I mean, it gets to the point where you almost start to take him for granted just a little bit. But man, I mean, he's been unbelievable. Best defenseman that the Rangers have had since Brian Leetch, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him. I feel like I want to watch Rangers games where they're not playing the Kings so I can appreciate him instead of being probably irritated.
Yeah, exactly. Being afraid of what he's going to do out there. Exactly.
Yeah.
You guys, the Kings do have a couple of former New York Rangers who I wanted to ask you about as well. And I think, Sarah, we did a couple of crossover episodes when these deals were struck. 2 separate deals, one in which Brandon Lemieux goes to the Kings, one in which Elias Anderson goes to the Kings. We can start with Lemieux. I saw he's got 7 goals and an assist this season, minus the unfortunate biting incident that he had earlier this season. How has he done with the Kings so far this year and even last year as well?
This year, last year, I will say I wasn't particularly impressed last year to the point where I was like, if Seattle took him, I wouldn't be too upset, But this year, he is, pun not intended, making me eat my words a little bit. His line, he kind of the third, fourth line, depending on how you look at it. It's him, Blake Lizotte, who's kind of a, smaller, but very energetic center, and Arthur Kaliev have been playing most of the time together. And they have been one of the most effective lines for the Kings. Looking at their points totals, you might not necessarily suspect that, but, they're keeping the puck in the zone. They're creating chances. They're creating havoc. And when Lemieux is playing on the right side of the line, AKA not biting people, he has been doing exactly what the Kings brought him in there to do, is stand up for his teammates and be a pest and be irritating and all that stuff. He's doing what he's getting paid to do there. And the goals, I feel like, are just sort of an added bonus. So I didn't love the trade. I still think that it'd be nicer to see one of the Kings prospects stepping up and filling that role. But at the end of the day, he's scored 7 goals, and the Kings have always had a problem with depth scoring, and he at least is doing that. And of course, when the whole biting thing happened, I know that he's a guy that rumors have always followed him of, maybe not the best liked guy in the room or everything. So of course the Kings all stand up to defend him. whenever all that stuff starts coming out. So you never know how he really is fitting in there. No teammate, I guess, unless you're a teammate of Evander Kane's, probably is gonna, speak up and be like, yeah, no, my teammate really is like not a great guy. But they all seem to like him. He seems to be having a lot of fun. So good job, I guess. Elias Anderson has been in and out of the lineup. He's been hurt a lot. I feel like he gets in the lineup and then he gets hurt and then he's back out of the lineup. I think that last season they've sort of flip-flopped, because last season I think was better for Anderson. He really generated a lot of chemistry with his line mates, and their line was pretty good. But because he's been in and out of the lineup so much, I think it's been a lot harder for him to develop a rhythm. And of course, now that he isn't waivers exempt, they're not going to want to send him to Ontario to get him in games, because they're not really going to want to risk losing him. But I think he's been good in flashes, but just hasn't really been able to get the consistent minutes that I think he would need to really be more established on the team.
Yeah, it's crazy with Lemieux. I mean, I've read those rumors too, that maybe he's not necessarily the most liked, player in the locker room among his teammates. But, to your point, Sarah, nobody, unless you're teammates with Evander Kane, is going to throw their own guy under the bus. But, the way you describe him, that's kind of his MO when he was on the Rangers. He would stand up for teammates. He would mix it up. It seemed like he was always kind of in the middle of everything. And, a little bit of a big brother type to certain players on the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's good to see that, he's contributed in a mostly positive way for the Kings this season. Is there anybody on the Kings who maybe isn't, really a household name, somebody that's kind of under the radar that Ranger fans should keep their eye on in this game here between these two teams?
So one person I'd say to keep an eye on is Sean Dursey. He is this is first season in the NHL. Made his debut a couple of games ago. He's a young defenseman, puck moving, creative defenseman. He has, just 7 points, 17 games, but he is someone who I think as he gets more comfortable in the league is going to be really fun to watch. But he has been making an impact and making a lot of really smart plays. The Kings don't have a ton of guys on the blue line outside of Drew Doughty who sort of play with that more offensive-minded, creative flair. And he also is, for a guy pegged as an offensive defenseman, is also, not afraid to make the big block and not afraid to get in there in a little bit more of a defensive capacity. So I'd say keep an eye out for him. And this guy is a little more of a household name if you had watched, the playoffs last season with Montreal. But Phil Deneau came in over the offseason in free agency, and he has been, people were like, oh, is this an overpay? Did we really need to give him this contract? And the answer is yes, you did. He has been really good for the Kings. I've enjoyed watching him. I used to cover the Blackhawks, and I covered them when he was a prospect there. So it feels a little weird to have everything come full circle, because now he's back on the team that I cover now. But he, second line center, defensive minded, but he's still scoring goals. He has 6 goals this season, which is, an added bonus. But he's been a lot of fun and has taken some of the pressure off of Anze Kopitar in regards to, Kopitar doesn't have to be out there for every defensive draw and every play in the defensive zone, because now they have another strong center down the middle who can help do some of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned Deneau, because I can remember going into the offseason this past year, and he was one of my, favorite targets in free agency as far as guys that the Rangers might look to bring in. Rangers were a little bit thin at center. Deneau, kind of a good two-way center, a little bit of a defensive center. I mean, obviously he can score a little bit too, but just a well-rounded player. Just one of those guys that's kind of a B+ at everything, so to speak. So he was somebody that I was interested in. It's interesting to hear that, he's done a nice job thus far with the Kings. As far as under the radar Rangers, I mean, it's kind of the same deal here. It's not like people haven't heard of Barclay Goodrow. I think most people have at least know who he is. And obviously, his profile is raised playing on the Lightning the last couple of seasons, winning a couple of Stanley Cups. But he's done a great job with the Rangers. Overall, he's, you bring him in, you want more toughness, you want more physicality. That's going to be kind of his calling card. But recently, you can't keep this guy off the scoreboard. I mean, every single game, he's getting a goal or an assist or something like that. And I looked this up today as well. And, I know he's been shipping in with some goals and some assists lately. He's actually 5th on the Rangers with 17 points, which is pretty wild to think about. I mean, I literally have the screen in front of me right here, and I'm like double checking it to make sure that's right. But yeah, all of a sudden, Goodrow is an assist machine, and he's setting up his teammates. He's scoring some goals. I mean, a couple of his goals, he's got 7. I think at least 2 of them are empty netters. But even so, I mean, Goodrow's been a heck of a pickup for this team. And, obviously that was kind of their mission this offseason was to get tougher and more physical. And all of a sudden this guy's contributing offensively as well. So I would say Goodrow is somebody to watch. And he's actually now playing on the Rangers' second line. Artemi Panarin's out of the lineup, and you've got Lafreniere, Strome, and Goodrow playing together. So kind of a makeshift second line. But, hey, it's clicking, so we'll take it.
Kings fans are familiar with him from his time on the Sharks too. That was an interesting signing because I feel like people were like, you're giving this guy all this money and he's basically a 4th liner, but here he is. He's not.
Yeah, no, I mean, he does all the little things. It's stuff that doesn't always, show up in the score sheet, but he does a heck of a job for the Rangers. But do you want to throw out a prediction? I mean, a final score, anybody to score a goal for the Kings, anything like that?
I think it would be really funny if Brendan Lemieux scored, so I'm going to go with that. I'm really big on players scoring against their former teams, so yeah. I would like to manifest one of those. I think this is going to be a tight one. I feel like it's a 3-2 game, and I would toss a coin if I had one to see who I thought was going to win, but I'll give the edge to the Rangers just because they've been on a hot streak lately, but also because it seems like every time I predict the Kings to win, they blow it. So I'm going to go with the Rangers winning.
That feeling. I'll say the Rangers win 4-2, and I have no doubt. You said Lemieux might score. I get the feeling Elias Anderson's probably going to score just to make it as ridiculous as possible. This is a stat that's absolutely crazy, but the Rangers have played 2 games against the Vegas Golden Knights this season. Brett Howden, who was on the Rangers for 3 years, just didn't work out, was never the player that they thought that he was going to be. He has 2 goals and an assist, 2 games against the Rangers. He only got 1 goal for the Rangers last year, the entire season, and it was an empty netter. So he has scored more goals against the Rangers this season than he scored for last season. So, yeah, I get the feeling, I'll say Rangers 4-2, but I would be shocked if the way things have gone, if Lemieux or Elias Anderson doesn't get on the score sheet. That's just kind of the way it's gone for the Rangers this season when they play their former players. So, yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
Anderson has yet to score a goal this season. He's only got 1 assist. Like I said, he's been in and out of the lineup. So I think that would be even funnier if he gets his first goal against the Rangers.
Exactly. That just convinces me even more that he's probably going to end up making it happen. But, I think the Rangers will pull out a 4-2 win, maybe with like an empty netter at the end there. All right, cool. Well, Sarah, this is a ton of fun as always. I figure we can probably do this again later this season. I think they play each other again one more time. Do they not?
I think so. I don't think they've been to New York yet. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look to do another crossover in the future. And Ranger fans and Kings fans, thanks for tuning in as always, and we'll see you guys next time. All right, so welcome back, Ranger.
All right, thanks to John for having a little chat with me all about the Kings and the Rangers game that is coming up tonight. Thanks also to Gil Martin for talking with me all about the Marc Bergevin news. All sorts of stuff coming up for you this week. I'm hoping to sit down with Laura and/or Scott from Locked On Canadiens to talk about Marc Bergevin, see what he's good at, what he's bad at, what this move might mean, what they're hearing up there in the market. So we're going to talk with them this week. Also talking with Hunter Hodes later this week about the Penguins, because we are welcoming them to Staples Center later this week. So we're going to get the latest update on the incredibly hot Penguins. They just had a win streak broken. It was like 10 games or something. It was crazy. So we're going to learn about them this week as well. And of course, tomorrow we'll be back to hear all about what goes down in this game against the New York Rangers. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks again to John and to Gil for talking with me today on the show. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at @RightSaidSarah. The show's on Twitter at Locked On LA Kings, and of course available wherever you get your podcasts, and also sort of kind of on YouTube. So make sure you're subscribing, make sure you're following the show, and telling your friends all about it, because we are here all season long to talk to you about the Los Angeles Kings. That is it for today. Thanks so much for listening and or watching. Until next time, this has been Locked On Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.